Had enough of my drivel, apparently. Oh well. 87222, start message the word Times. You can tweet me at Times Radio. Please send me your blockbuster videos. Reboot it for today's politics. We'll do some more of those later. But right now, grab your popcorn, get on the YouTubes. PMQs is next.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley, and this is Times Radio. In just a moment, we'll bring you PMQs Unpacked. But first, a quick look at the headlines this lunchtime. At least one person's been killed and several injured after a car drove into a crowd of people in Western Berlin and smashed through a shop window. Firefighters say 5 people have life-threatening injuries. Police say they don't know if it's an accident or a deliberate act. A man's been detained at the scene. Health Secretary Sajid Javid has told Times Radio the RMT union needs to act like grown-ups when it comes to planned strike action. Fans heading to Glastonbury Festival are among those facing travel chaos later this month, with thousands of railway workers taking part in 3 days of strikes. It's understood talks are to be held in the next few days. Fuel prices at the pumps have risen again, less than 24 hours after the last jump. The average cost for a litre of petrol is now £1.80, up 2 pence on yesterday. Diesel's gone up by just over a penny to a record of £1.86. And we'll bring you more on all those stories in a full news and sport roundup at 12:30. But now it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, order. I call Matt Chorley and Patrick Maguire.
Yes, it's that time on a Wednesday where you grab yourself some popcorn, pour yourself a coffee, and log on to the YouTubes, where you can not only listen to Times Radio's PMQs Unpacked, but watch along live. And if you do log on right now, you'll see Patrick Maguire looking very smart.
Thank you. I always do on a Wednesday, just for you, although we are going for a high-powered lunch after
We are going
this,
for a
aren't we?
high-powered lunch after, so I look forward to that. What do we expect from PMQs today? It's one of those sometimes, and there's hundreds of people already online watching along. The expectation is high. Sometimes when expectation is high, it doesn't always meet those expectations.
Yes, particularly because Labour aren't entirely sure what they want to do about Boris Johnson's intense period of difficulty. His inner circle are split over what exactly the point is that they want to make, or whether they want to punch that particular bruise, because there's an influential circle of opinion around Keir Starmer that would say, look, it's great for us to have a wounded Tory minister in office. Also, it's one of those weeks where actually some of the backbench Conservative questions will be more interesting, I think, than Keir Starmer's clash with Boris Johnson, not to write off the next 25 minutes before we embark on him.
Well, lots of people are logging on. They're all saying where they are. Alex says hello from beautiful Chiclayo in Peru. Oh, posh. First time I've managed to listen, watch live. Should be a feisty one today. Candy and me too. Morning from upstate New York. Tim says, hello from Drayton near Langport. It's very close to where I used to live. It's the only way to watch or listen to PMQs. We need the sanity you bring to the circus performance every Wednesday. Yeah, I grew up in Curry Rival, Tim, and then moved to Staithe. That's a sentence which will mean something to about 100 people in the world. Someone else is in Old York. Hi from Germany. Good evening from Bangkok, says Ian. Greetings from the Docklands, says Kelly. Craig says good afternoon from Cape Town. Hello from Vienna, says Karen. Blimey, it's a proper international affair today. Let us know. I'll tell you what, go online to the chat on YouTube. What do you think Keir Starmer should ask today? Should he ask about Boris Johnson and the vote in no confidence, or should he put all that to one side and focus on other things, cost of living crisis? I suspect he won't raise strikes, because I suspect that Boris Johnson might ask his own questions to whether or not Labour support the strikes on that. But let us know. Go on the YouTube, search Times Radio. You can watch along. Patrick Maguire and I. We've both got our jackets on and everything today.
Well, as befits a great state occasion, like the first PMQs after a no-confidence vote.
How is the mood in it? I mean, it might actually be more interesting, and dare I say this, when we do the best of the rest, the backbench questions after the 12:30 news. Do you think there'll be any hostile questioning from there?
Well, not to undermine our own conceit here, but Andrew Mitchell, persistent critic of the Prime Minister, long-time supporter but persistent critic, like so many members of the Conservative Party who've had their initial investment in Boris Johnson turned into junk bonds. Several women of a certain age could also tell you that. He'll have been up, and it'll be interesting to see what people like him say. I believe David Davies also has a PMQ as well. So you have lots of people who are with axes to grind and with points to make, who will be very aware of the gravity of the occasion.
David Davies, of course, used PMQs back in January to
quote Leo Amory and say, "In the name of God, go!" Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll have to Keir Starmer up momentarily in the House of Commons. This is PMQs Unpacked. Matt Chorley, Patrick Maguire, Times Red Box editor. Loads of you logging on. Here we go then. Let us know where you are. Let us know what you think Keir Starmer should ask. Post your questions in the on the YouTubes. But here we go then. This is question number 1 from Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I couldn't make out whether that introductory noise was cheers or boos.
I think that's a St Paul's joke from Keir Starmer.
The trouble is, I don't know whether it's directed at me or him. I joined the Prime Minister in his comments about carers. Why did his Culture Secretary, I think hiding along the bench,
that's Nadine
say
Dorris,
that successive Conservative governments left our health service wanting and inadequate when the pandemic hit?
Just to explain what's going on there. Earlier in the week, on Monday, Jeremy Hunt said Boris Johnson should go and he wouldn't be voting for him. It's time for change, he said. And Nadine Dorris replied to this with, I think it's fair to say, a pretty extraordinary series of tweets in which she sort of laid out the details of various conversations she'd had with Jeremy Hunt back in early 2020. And she was a health minister. And she said, your pandemic preparation during 6 years as health secretary was found wanting and inadequate. Your duplicity right now in destabilising the part of the country to serve your own personal ambition more so. You've been wrong about almost everything. You're wrong again now.
It's a remarkable salvo for one Conservative MP to fire at another, all the more so given that we learned from this morning's Times that it was directly authorised by Number 10. And even more so when you consider Nadine Dorries was a health minister during a pandemic into which there is now an inquiry to which you will be required to give evidence under oath. And you expect the government council will say, well, Nadine, I refer you to your tweets of the 6th of June in which you said we are woefully unprepared. This is a common Keir Starmer tactic, though. You know, you weaponise Tory psychodrama and say, look, they're not delivering on your priorities because they're too busy scrapping like ferrets in a sack.
I can actually see in the comments whether or not Jeremy Hunt is there. So looking on the front bench, so there's Boris Johnson, then you've got Priti Patel. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or so people along the front bench before you get to Nadine Dorries. Let's go back then. This is Boris Johnson's
response.
Much
to her disappointment, I'm sure.
Mr. Speaker, everybody knows that when the pandemic hit, it was an entirely novel virus for which the whole world was unprepared. And nobody at that stage, nobody knew how to test for it. Nobody knew what the right quarantine rules should be, Mr. Speaker. But as it happened, the UK government and our amazing NHS produced, not only approved the first vaccine anywhere in the world. We were the first to get it into anybody's arms, Mr. Speaker. And we had the fastest rollout anywhere in Europe, none of which would have been possible if we'd listened to him.
I mean, that was the flaw in that question. I mean, it's quite a clever question, needling the internal psychodrama, but it did just give Boris Johnson to wheel out one of his greatest hits. And we've heard it a lot this week. He got the big call right on the vaccine.
Yes, exactly. It's given him an opportunity to rehearse for the benefit of wavering Tory MPs, the one basically incontrovertible part of his record, which, regardless of the preparedness for the pandemic and regardless of the amount of suitcases of wine consumed in Number 10 during, that the big strategic calls Boris Johnson can broadly say with a straight face that he got right. So perhaps not the best opening gambit from Keir Starmer there.
In terms of questions that Keir Starmer should have asked, Mary says, ask when is the Prime Minister going to resign, before or after the time it took his predecessor to resign, after she was considered safe after a confidence vote with a better percentage than him. It's a bit convoluted, but it's not a bad. Gambit. When will the government reveal a comprehensive housing policy, says Tom, that will rent us increase the housing stock?
To which Boris Johnson will say, nah, next week.
Yeah, exactly. That's all. It's all coming next week. And Simon says, how is scrapping the HS2 Goulburn link in Cheshire and Greater Manchester levelling up? Plenty going. Lots of
question 6 if ever there was one.
Lots of you asking, saying you should talk about the cost of living. Right, let's go back then. This is PMQs Unpacked. You can listen on Times Radio, watch along on the YouTubes. It's question 2 from Keir Starmer.
I think the Prime Minister just agreed with the Culture Secretary. Perhaps she said it. They didn't deny it. Perhaps she said it because it's true. Yeah, exactly. It starts with GPs. People were unhappy with the service they were getting before the pandemic. Not enough GPs. Too hard to get an appointment. That's why he promised 6,000 new GPs. But his health secretary admits he won't keep that promise. Yeah. Nope. Despite the hard work of doctors, people can't see a GP in person. They're unhappier than ever with GP services. If GP provision was wanting and inadequate before the pandemic, what is it now?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid he's simply wrong, because he's wrong about what we're doing. And of course, we've got to clear the COVID backlogs, and everybody understands that. Everybody understands the pressure that the NHS is under. But they are responding magnificently, and I can tell him that thanks to the investments that this government has put in, we now have 4,300 more doctors. We have record numbers. We have record numbers in training. To the best of my, we have 11,800 more nurses this year than last year, Mr. Speaker, and 72,000 in training. And that is because of the investment that we put in, which was opposed by the party opposite. And the only reason we were able to make that investment, Mr. Speaker, is because we have a strong and robust economy, thanks to the decisions we took.
Well, there was quite the interesting thing there is I think Keir Starmer's got his finger on something. Talking about GPs, every time we talk about GPs on the radio, we are inundated by people who've had nightmare horror stories of trying to get appointments and so on.
Yes, and that's really interesting. It's interesting that Keir Starmer is striking the same note as David Davis struck in a piece for the Times Red Box this morning, in which he said it's all very well and good the Prime Minister talking about the big calls, and it's debatable as to whether the Prime Minister got all the big calls right, but the Prime Minister can bang on about the pandemic, Partygate aside, his support for Ukraine, yeah, fine. But he said the small calls are what matter to people's lives, the knotty issues in public services, not being able to get a passport, queues at airports, and indeed an example he cited was not being able to get a doctor's appointment. So clearly this issue, it all comes back to that D word for Boris Johnson, delivery, and that remains the biggest question hanging over him, for both electorates, Tory MPs and the public.
It's interesting. When we did a focus group recently in Tiverton and Honiton. In fact, you'll be able to hear on the show tomorrow. We're doing one in Wakefield tonight, ahead of that by-election. So we'll be able to hear that on the show tomorrow. And GP surgeries came up so much as being like one of the big grievances, and it's not a surprise that some of the other parties have picked that up and run with that this time. All the big hitters. I have to say, there's no getting away from PMQs today for the cabinet. You've got Dominic Raab on one side, Liz Truss on the other side of Boris Johnson. Then you've got all the way down Priti Patel, Sajid Javid. Sajid Javid was sort of leaning over and trying to give Boris Johnson some tips on what to say about the NHS. Then Rishi Sunak, who's carefully positioned himself so he's not on the telly a huge amount. Steve Barker, the Chief of Staff, Nadeem Zahawi, and then you get to Nadine Dorries, who's even further down the front bench. Lots of you posting comments on the YouTube channel as well. Richard says GPs are under so much pressure. Lowe's want to retire early. Thanks, Boris. And Lou points out off the back of Boris Johnson giving his ringing endorsement on how he's managing the NHS, points out, I thought the NHS was like Blockbuster, which is what Sajid Javid's been saying today, and why it needs a major overhaul. It can't both be perfect and needing major reform.
Exactly. That's the problem when you knock public services for which you are responsible for delivering and have been for the past 12 years.
Here we go then. It's PMQs Unpacked. We'll go back to the House of Commons now. It's question number 3 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, of course he talks big, but I've got a letter here to the Prime Minister from the honourable member from Hereford and South Herefordshire. He said this is you, Prime Minister. Under you, the government seems to lack a sense of mission. It has a large majority, but no long-term plan. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's Big Plan Act is so tired that even once loyal MPs don't believe it.
That's the letter from Jesse
And
Norman we saw
it's
this
not just
week.
waiting for a GP. It's waiting for all NHS treatment. Take cancer. For over a decade, waiting times for cancer care have been going up. His solution was supposed to be diagnostic hubs. The Health Secretary has been on a victory lap this week. But here's the rub, Prime Minister. Since they were opened last year, 135,000 extra people are now waiting for scans and tests. Can he think of a better way to describe soaring cancer waiting lists than wanting an inadequate?
Mr. Speaker, it is entirely right after the pandemic that people are now coming forward to get their cancer tests, and we have actively encouraged that, and that is the right thing for people to do. But as a result of the community diagnostic hubs that we are bringing in, 100 of them across the country, Mr. Speaker, we are able to cut the times for cancer diagnosis, help people to get their scans, their tests faster, and above all, we can do that, Mr. Speaker, because we're hiring more radiographers, we're hiring more nurses, we're hiring more professionals in our NHS because of the investments that we made, which, as I say, the party of Bevan tragically opposed.
Boris Johnson there, just actually sort of rehashing what he said before. Here's an interesting thought, Patrick, because Keir Starmer sort of kicks off with Jesse Norman's letter. It was a pretty brutal letter. Former minister, former supporter of Boris Johnson. Not just sticking in a letter of no comment, but sticking the boot in as well on Monday. Would it not have been better, given the amount of material that Keir Starmer's got, to do each question putting forward not his own views,
but the views of Conservative MPs like Jesse Norman. Yes, exactly.
Jesse Norman. And actually, it doesn't need to be about confidence. It could have been particular because there's lots of concerns about particular policies. But get up, put forward the view, get Boris Johnson to blather on like that. So, well, that wasn't my view, actually. That was the view of Conservative MP for there, Conservative MP for here. Instead, Jesse Norman thing got completely lost then.
Yeah, it was almost just like all great journalistic drop intros, it's a conceit you use, never revisit over the next 400 words. No, it's really interesting, isn't it? And because we know this Labour leadership, as you heard from Peter Mandelson on the show earlier, as Peter Mandelson is saying as we speak, is squeamish about making big calls and being bold and ambitious. You know, you might say rightly, given that, look how voters rewarded Labour for having a very bold and very ambitious manifesto in 2019. But that's an easy rhetorical workaround for Keir Starmer. If you don't want to be seen to be making policy commitments that you may later regret, turn the Prime Minister's own MP's words back on him, as you say. But Labour, whoever wrote this, doesn't seem to have alighted on that rather obvious open goal. Yeah, it's a bit of a muddle so far. But anyway, we'll go back. We continue. PMQs Unpacked. Don't forget you can listen along on the radio. You can watch along on the YouTubes. Go to YouTube, search Times Radio, and you can see Pat McGuire and I in all of our flesh. Right, question number 4 from Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the problem is the cancer rates have been going up for 10 years, and they're even higher now. So blaming the pandemic just won't wash. Perhaps the Culture Secretary was talking about the state of NHS buildings. Before the pandemic, the NAO said they were a risk to patients. The government's response, paint jobs and fix-ups, pretending that's the same as building new hospitals. The Treasurer and the Cabinet Office apparently don't think that the refurbs are even going to be delivered. Take University Hospital North Tees. The ceiling is falling in, the roof leaks, and staff have to hose down the pipes to stop them freezing over. Failure to fix wanting and inadequate NHS buildings is putting patients at risk, isn't it, Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, this line of criticism is satirical, coming from a Labour government, attacking our hospital building programme, Mr. Speaker, where they were the authors of the PFI scheme that bankrupted so many hospitals. Mr. Speaker, what we're doing instead is building 48 new hospitals. Yes, we are. Thanks to the biggest capital investment programme in the history of the NHS. From memory, we put £33 billion as soon as we came in, then another 92 to cope with the pandemic, plus another 39 billion in the health and care levy. They opposed that funding. They opposed the health and care levy. They don't have a leg to stand on. We're building the foundations of our NHS's, our health services' future, and they should support it.
That was low energy from both of them. It's, what was that? Question 4 from Keir Starmer?
Question 4, yeah. Now talking about a roof falling in a hospital.
Look, worthy stuff, important stuff, and part of the story the Labour Party needs to tell about the government if it's going to win, even if it's to make progress in the next election, let alone talk about denying the Tories a majority or indeed winning a majority of their own. But God, the delivery was drawn out, plodding, flat.
And it's
Come
not,
on.
Keir Starmer's not telling a story with this. So the whole argument about these 50, the Conservative manifesto promised 40 new hospitals. And then some guidance was put out by the Department of Health, which defined a new hospital in 3 ways. It could be a whole new hospital on a new site, or current NHS land, a major new building on an existing site, or a new wing of an existing building, or a major refurbishment of alteration of all but building frame or main structure. So, they're not even real hospitals. And Keir Starmer's not really telling, the sort of...
But also, why are we talking about hospitals? I'm sorry. The Prime Minister has lost the support of 41% of his MPs. It's the first opportunity Keir Starmer's had to talk to him directly. And look, a provincial boy, I care nothing more about the state of Southport and Ormskirk General Hospital. But if Keir Starmer's mentioning, the children's ward, bring back Southport Children's A&E right now, I'd say, what are you doing? What? Come on.
I mean, the other thing is, which I find this very odd, is the government announced that this week was Health Week.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson's got all this stuff at his fingertips. They're announcing a reform of the event. I mean, you could argue about whether or not it's going to work and all of that. But straight after PMQ, Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, is giving a statement on their NHS plans. Why is he giving the government an opportunity to
talk about the thing it wants to
talk about? Boris Johnson decided that this week he wants to talk about the NHS.
Look at the BBC News ticker that's visible in the studio. The strap, and say you're having lunch in Wetherspoons or you're in a hospital waiting room, you see that ticket says Prime Minister's questions. Government has done some very big and remarkable thing. Government is hiring more doctors and nurses. Why is that ticker not saying Prime Minister denies that he is a liar or whatever? Yeah. The point of this half hour every Wednesday, as much as it might say something about our democracy that it is, it's political theatre. It's Keir Starmer's one opportunity a week to land on the news bulletins and attack on Boris Johnson or Labour's messaging. And I'm sorry, I don't think he's done that today.
I enjoyed it. The 2 examples you reached for were sitting in Wetherspoons or waiting in A&E in a hospital.
The duality of man. Sometimes I do both in the same day. Yeah.
The 2 things are not necessarily unconnected. Well, let me see if he gets any better. Brace yourselves. Oh, no. Oh, so we won't go back to Keir Starmer. I think we've got a little bit of Lindsay Hoyle for Lindsay Hoyle fans.
Both of you need to calm down. And there's 2 over here as well. The 4 of you could have a very nice cup of tea if you wish. Keir Starmer.
I'll tell you what, go on. As you're here, Patrick.
What?
It's been a long time since we've had a lathe.
Oh, don't touch the lathe.
Lovely stuff. Here's Keir Starmer.
Oh dear. Prime Minister. Dear.
I'm doing an impression of Mavis on Coronation Street.
Pretending. Mr. Speaker, pretending no rules for Prime Minister, he chunters on. Pretending no rules were broken didn't work. Pretending the economy is booming didn't work. And pretending to build 40 new hospitals won't work either. They want him to change, but he can't. As always with this Prime Minister, when he's falling short, he just changes the rules and lowers the bar. In March, he proposed changing the NHS contract. He wants to double the length of time patients can be made to wait for surgery, from 1 year to 2 years. On top of that, he scrapped zero tolerance of 12-hour waits at A&E. 24 Hours at A&E used to be a TV programme. Now it's his policy. Well, it's Health Week. And he's telling all of them.
Order! Mr. Cleverlake, we've got a tea party gathering. I'm sure you don't want to be part of it. I will hear the question. The problem is, so do our constituents. I wonder if I were you, and I think one or two of you might be going early. What I would say is, look, I need to hear the question in the same way I expect to hear the answer. So please, Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I bet they wish they were this organised on Monday. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's Health Week, and he's telling them he's going to turn over a new leaf. So why doesn't he start by scrapping his plans to greenlight wanting and inadequate NHS standards?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, look, I've got to tell him, I just think that this line of attack is not working, Mr. Speaker. But it's not.
I think lots of Labour MPs would agree.
It's not working because they refuse to approve.
Once again, I think the two of you need to calm down. So please, we don't want to see an empty front bench, Prime Minister.
Look, we've not only raised the standards in the NHS, we're not only reducing waiting times for those who've had to wait the longest, Mr. Speaker, but what we're doing more fundamentally is doing what the people of this country can see is simple common sense, and that is using our economic strength to invest in doctors and nurses and get people on the wards, get people, giving people their scans and their screens and their tests in a more timely manner and getting and taking our NHS forward. We are on target, Mr. Speaker, thanks to this government, to recruit 50,000 more nurses. Thanks to the investments, I've just got to repeat this because he doesn't seem to have heard it so far. Thanks to the investments that party opposed. Perhaps he can now explain why they opposed them.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Right.
What a mess.
So, simultaneously, but two texts arrive at the same time. Sue on the Wirral says, Matt and Patrick listen to the same PMQs as me. Starmer doing a great job highlighting the Tories' failure on the NHS. Tony texted exactly the same time. Keir Starmer is taking penalties at a goal with no goalkeeper. Still kicks the ball anywhere but the goal. Hasn't got a clue, has he? Almost everyone watching on the YouTube channel is being critical of Keir Starmer.
Well, look, I wouldn't expect anything less from a resident of the People's Republic of Merseyside. Well, it depends where you are on the world, I suppose. Look, I mean, even Labour MPs will come out that PMQs thinking, how have we managed to turn this into
I don't like to disappoint you, but I've got one more to come yet from Keir Starmer.
Well, God, into a dull NHS procedural, which is what we've had and are having. As you said, there is no attempt to narrativise this criticism. It is dull and technical. Also, you know, something occurred to me when Starmer said it's Health Week. Who outside of Westminster, and I say outside of Westminster, who outside of morning email writers, you know, you're an emeritus member of that particular guild, and political operatives even know that? Why is Keir Starmer reinforcing the government's messaging? It doesn't make any sense. It's symptomatic of this, you know, too clever by half Westminster bubble thinking that certain parts of the Labour Party are sadly too susceptible to.
Tom says, Keir Starmer asking questions gives Johnson the opportunity to look like Joe Root scoring another century. Hopeless. Femi, with this inept opposition, if the Tories keep Tiverton, they'll be on to another 80-seat majority. Just so many of you. I do wish Keir Starmer would ask more pointed questions rather than giving long-sided expositions. I'm genuinely not just picking out with the exception of lovely Sue on the Wirral, there's a lone voice in saying that Keir Starmer's doing a good job.
But it's very confusing because throughout the Sue Gray saga, Keir Starmer has, by and large, risen to these parliamentary occasions. As we've noted several times over the past few months, his performance at these big set-piece events has improved. And you know, when you and I bumped into a senior shadow cabinet minister very close to Keir Starmer on the Commons terrace the other night, you know, a certain amount of drink had been taken on everybody's part, I think. But they or she said, you know, joked that, you know, we could expect a lacklustre performance from Keir Starmer. And we were all joking, but we've had it.
I don't even need to get bogged down in the Labour Party and penises. That's an entirely separate issue. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons. Question number 6 from Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer,
Mr. Speaker, raising taxes because you failed to grow the economy isn't a plan for the NHS, and everyone sitting behind him knows it. Members of this cabinet admit that Conservatives left our health system wanting and inadequate when the pandemic hit. He's been in power for 3 years, and things are getting worse, not better. Fewer GPs, more waits for cancer tests, buildings still crumbling, and he's changing the rules to cover up his failure. And there is a real human pain as a result. Today I spoke to Hamza Semakula. Hamza is 20 and he plays semi-professional football for Hendon. He tore his ACL earlier this year. Because of the 2-year wait for surgery, he had to crowdfund for a private operation. I also spoke to Akshay Patel. Last year, his mother woke up unable to breathe. Akshay called 999 6 times. In his last call, he said, "I rang an hour ago for an ambulance as she had difficulty breathing, and now she's dead." Even he must admit that Akshay, Bina and Hamza deserve better than a wanting and inadequate government utterly unable to improve our NHS.
Mr. Speaker, I think everybody in the House has sympathy with Akshay and the other constituents and their families and the other constituents that he mentions, Mr. Speaker, and I share their feelings. But when you look at what this government is doing, the massive and I must say this to him, we are making colossal investments in our NHS. We are cutting waiting times, we're raising standards, we're paying nurses more, we're supporting our fantastic NHS. And by the way, he continually came to this, I just remind him of this, and said that we had the worst COVID record in Europe. Turned out to be completely untrue. He still hasn't retracted it.
It's almost Captain Hindsight
We're doing
making
it,
that
Mr.
point.
Speaker. We can make those investments because of the strength of the UK economy, because of the fiscal firepower that we have to deploy. We have the lowest unemployment now since 1974, and we are going to continue to grow our economy for the long term. He asked about the mission of this government, Mr. Speaker. It is to unite and level up across our whole country, to unleash the potential of our entire country. The biggest tutoring programme in history for young people, raising literacy and numeracy standards for 11-year-olds from 65% adequacy to our 90%. That is the highest objective I think a government could achieve. Expanding home ownership for millions of people, as my right honourable friend for Duluth and I will do, for millions of people who currently don't have it. Cutting the costs of business to make this the enterprise centre of Europe. That is our vision. Creating high-wage, high-skilled jobs for this country. And as for jobs, I'm going to get on with mine, and I hope he gets on with his.
But Boris Johnson there, noticing that Keir Starmer hadn't got him any near the news agenda, so he's offered it up anyway. As for jobs, I'm getting on with mine. I mean, it's the closest to the big political story of the week.
Yes, and it's remarkable that, look, you could see what Keir Starmer was trying to do, pointing to Boris Johnson's selective relationship with rules and codes of conduct. You can see why the Labour Party want to talk about the serious issues of public services, the NHS. Indeed, when most people, indeed the Times top leader in the paper today, makes the point that this is a government that lurches from crisis to crisis. Its announcements are merely attempts to manage the media when it gets into sticky situations, and are rarely substantive or well thought through or developed policy solutions to the pressing challenges that face this country. But still, come on. Come on. That was so boring. That was nothing else.
We've been critical of Keir Starmer in the past, and Boris Johnson is a master at completely changing the subject and talk about other things. But as an exercise in not making the most of an opportunity, and to identify the government,
Keir Starmer's limitations.
The government brief. This is Health Week. We're going to make a series of big announcements this week on the NHS, and that's what Keir Starmer chose to talk about for half an hour.
What I just find remarkable still, and look, there are no shortage of even great sympathisers and fans and aides to and shadow cabinet allies of Keir Starmer who will make this point with varying degrees of diplomacy. He's not a great parliamentary performer. That's not his strength. That's not why he was elected. But 2 years in, you at least expect him to be able to ad-lib a little bit, think on his feet, respond with a degree of fleetness of foot. Indeed, the one occasion where he did, that pantomime dame, oh dear, was the biggest laugh of the session.
Yeah.
That was a flash of the parliamentary performer a leader of the opposition, Labour, could have at the dispatch box. But, you know, if you're a Tory MP who's worrying about the next election, but nonetheless, you know, swallowed your doubts and voted for Boris Johnson, and you watch that, regardless of the, you know, inane answers the Prime Minister gave to most questions, on a purely, you know, campaign basis, right? You look at those two performers and think, you know what, 6 weeks against this guy, you know, could we really pull off the unthinkable here? Is this not Ed Miliband, Neil Kinnock Redux?
Well, there we are. A few of you have been in touch to say, someone on Twitter says, in short, I disagree with your analysis. Have a lovely day, which is the nicest message I've ever had. Someone saying, I used to think you were too mean to Starmer, not willing to give him a chance. Now I'm a bit heartbroken he can't do better. And somebody else thinks it's not an own goal by Starmer and thinks the public are stupid. Without the tax rise for the NHS, how do you invest and improve the NHS? Which is an interesting point. The government, you know, the Labour Party currently opposes putting up national insurance to fund efforts to bring down the back. You can argue whether or not they're working, but anyway, we've gone on way too long analysing. But I'll be honest, 35 minutes we're not going to get back in our lives. We'll do the best of the rest if there were indeed any better. It's going to be much worse, to be honest. 87222, start message of the word times. Let me know what you thought about PMQs. You can watch along on the YouTubes. But now let's get some news from Mike Powell.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Good afternoon. The Prime Minister has faced MPs' questions for the first time since surviving the confidence vote earlier this week. He immediately came under fire from Labour's Dame Angela Eagle, asking if 148 of his own MPs don't support him, why should the public?
This week's events, Mr Speaker, have demonstrated just how loathed this Prime Minister is. And that's only in his own party.
Boris Johnson fired back by saying his government has done some very remarkable things and absolutely nothing will stop them from delivering for the British people. Ministers are calling on unions to get around the table and keep talking over concerns about major railway strikes. Up to 50,000 employees could walk out for 3 days later this month. At least one person has died and around 30 others injured after a car drove into a crowd in Western Berlin. Emergency services say the vehicle then smashed through a shop window. Police say that a man believed to be the driver of the vehicle has been detained. The RAC says the average price of petrol has endured its biggest daily jump in 17 years. The rise yesterday of 2p a litre brings the average price at the pump for unleaded to nearly £1.81 a litre. The weather, rain clearing eastern England but lingering across central Scotland and the northeast of England. Scattered showers breaking out in many places with the risk of hail and thunder. Drier and sunnier across northwest Scotland. Now, Nick Ellaby has the sport.
US golfer Phil Mickelson has refused to say whether he's serving a ban from the American Tour over his involvement in the controversial Saudi-backed Super League.
I choose not to speak publicly on PGA Tour issues at this time.
Can you say if you're going to play in next week's US Open?
I will play next week's US Open. I'm looking forward to it.
The six-time major winner confirmed he has no intention of resigning from the PGA Tour, though, and says it's been incredible to have been part of the tour for over 30 years.
I worked really hard to earn a lifetime exemption. I don't want to give that up. I don't believe I should have to. I don't know what that means for a future, but I don't know what's going to happen, but I've earned that. I don't plan on just giving it up.
A number of players signed up to the lucrative Live Series have quit the tour, reportedly in order to continue playing in golf's 4 major tournaments, which are run by different bodies. It looks like the American businessman Chris Kirchner's attempted takeover of League One football side Derby County will collapse. It's reported he's failed to close the deal despite 2 extensions and hasn't stumped up promised cash to help pay Derby's wage bill. Women's Super League champions Chelsea have signed France defender Eve Perisset on a 3-year contract. She joins from Bordeaux. Chelsea boss Emma Hayes says Perisset brings versatility and experience to her squad. To cricket, where former Yorkshire head coach Andrew Gale has won a claim for unfair dismissal against the club. He was one of 16 members of staff sacked by the county following the Azim Rafiq racism scandal. Gale made his legal claim alongside 5 other ex-employees. A judge found their complaint was well-founded. And Saracens flanker Ben Earl has been crowned Rugby Union's Premiership Player of the Season. Gloucester and Wales's Lewis Rees-Zammit picked up the Best Try award for his solo effort against Newcastle. And London Irish's young fullback Henry Arundel, now knocking on England manager Eddie Jones's door, was named Discovery of the Season.
This is Times Radio.
With the new National Lottery scratch card, you could win £1 million in an instant. Like when a pigeon does a number on your coat. Ugh. So you nip to the shop for tissues, and in that instant, you just decide to get a scratch card. Woo-hoo-hoo! Make today a Wednesday. Maybe £1 million Wednesday. With a new scratch card from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
On digital radio, on the web, and via the Times Radio app. Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
Very good afternoon to you. It's Matt Chorley bringing you the Keir Starmer fan club here on Times Radio after a knockout blockbuster at PMQs. Do keep your comments coming in. Patrick Maguire, Times Red Box editor, is still here. You can watch along on the YouTubes. There's a lively debate happening on the Times Radio YouTube channel. Maybe somebody in Keir Starmer's office should read it. It might be handy. Somebody even suggested he should watch back some of our YouTube videos to get some tips.
I'm sure he does every Wednesday night.
I'm sure he loves your Lindsay Hoyle impression. Right, this is the point where we bring you the best of the rest, which of course tradition dictates that we have to kick off with the SNP leader in Westminster, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in supporting our carers? Mr. Speaker, week after week, I've called on this Prime Minister to resign. I've been met with a wall of noise from the Tory benches. I thought they were trying to shout me down, but all this time... But all this time, Mr. Speaker, it turns out that 41% of them have been cheering me on. Because, Mr. Speaker, let's be clear, at least the numbers don't lie. 41% of his own MPs have no confidence in him. 66 of MPs across the House don't support him, and 97% of Scottish MPs want the Minister for the Union shown the door. We now have the lame duck Prime Minister presiding over a divided party in a disunited kingdom. So, how does the Prime Minister expect to continue when even unionist leaders in Scotland won't back him?
Prime Minister. I want to thank the right honourable gentleman for his characteristic warm words. And actually, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the biggest and most powerful and effective advocate of the United Kingdom over the last time that I've been in has been that man there. I don't know how long he's going to last here as leader of the SNP, the Scottish Assembly. Long may he rest in place, Mr. Speaker. He is the Araldite that's keeping our kingdom together. I thank him for what he's doing.
You know, in 5 years of watching Ian Blackford, that's the first time I've laughed with him and not at him. That speaks volumes about the quality of Keir Starmer's
But he also,
today.
crucially, Ian Blackford right on the money of the news of the week.
It's a very well constructed question, that.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
It was genuinely funny that they weren't trying to shout me down. 41% agree with me. There's a completely different tone as well with Boris Johnson. You get the sense that he quite likes Ian Blackford. He enjoys his exchanges with Ian Blackford far more than Keir Starmer. There's no love lost between, because sometimes in politics they might disagree about things, but they might sort of get a lot. William Hague and Tony Blair used to sort of enjoy the knockabout of all this. There's a sort of loathing between Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson.
They are fundamentally different men. They're fundamentally different men, right? Keir Starmer, I hate to use one of Priti Patel's favourite buzz phrases, but he is a lefty lawyer from Islington. I'm not saying that. Not from Islington, from the London Borough of Camden.
Boris Johnson, of course, famously is from Islington.
Yeah, exactly. But he is. They're on two sides of the fundamental cultural divide in how we view English society that Boris Johnson weaponised to such great effect as a columnist and a political campaigner. So clearly their worldviews fundamentally clash. So there is a sort of, deep atavistic loathing between the two in a way that, Ian Blackford is part of life's rich tapestry for Boris Johnson, I think. He's a variety player, isn't he?
Oh, well, there we go. Who are we going to next? Colin Eastwood, Labour MP, asked a question.
Social Democratic and Labour Party leader.
Of course. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for correct. I knew you. That's what you're here for, Patch. That's what you're here for.
Ambassador from the Celtic Fringe, yeah.
Let's go to the comments.
We hear reports that the Prime Minister refused to consult the First Treasury Council on his plans to rip up the protocol. Now, I know this question might be a bit redundant, given he might not be around very much longer. But given the Prime Minister's casual record of casual law breaking, will he give a commitment to the people of Northern Ireland that he will not break international law anytime soon?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I can tell him that the reports that he's seen this morning are not correct, and what I can also tell him is that the most important commitment that I think everybody in this House has made is to the balance and symmetry of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. That is our highest legal international priority, and that is what we must deliver.
So this is could well be the big story of next week. The government plan to publish its legislation on what it's going to do on the Northern Ireland Postcard.
Yes, indeed. And it's a very big story in its own right, of course, both because the Prime Minister is, tearing up his own Brexit deal and triggering a trade war with the European Union at a time of acute economic uncertainty across the continent. But politically as well, is an absolutely incendiary move to be undertaking at a time when you've just alienated the part of the party that is most aggrieved by this sort of Brexit sabre rattling. And also, it's just going to alienate all the wrong people.
Well, we'll see how that pans out next week. Maybe Keir Starmer might ask about that at PMQs next week. In terms of one of the big, the real life stories that people are actually talking about, whether or not you can go on holiday is obviously one if your plane takes off. You can't even get near a plane if you haven't got a passport, which was raised by the Labour MP Afzal Khan.
Mr. Speaker, I'd have more sympathy for the words "get on with the job" if it actually started in the first place.
Boris Johnson's putting a very strange face at that.
2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister told the House, to the best of my knowledge, everybody is getting their passport within 4 to 6 weeks. However, the Passport Office is currently quoting a 10-week service time, with many of my constituents waiting well over that period. Cancelled summer trips could cost families over £1 billion. Does the Prime Minister accept that the Passport Office backlog is placing additional pressure on families already struggling with the cost of living crisis?
Actually, Mr. Speaker, what we're doing is 91% are getting their passport within 6 weeks, I can tell him, Mr. Speaker. And we are putting hundreds and hundreds more staff into the Passport Office. And the strength of demand, by the way, is a sign of the robustness of the economy, because everybody is frankly wanting to go on holiday, and quite right too, Mr. Speaker. But when it comes to travel chaos, have we heard any condemnation yet from the opposition, from the RMT and their reckless?
We were waiting for that.
What about that?
Thank you, Mr.
Oh, that's enough of that. No, we haven't heard from the Labour Party on the RMT, and it's wonder it took Boris Johnson quite so long to raise it.
Yes, well, because Keir Starmer was too busy talking about the caved-in ceilings of hospitals in North Teesside.
He was asking Boris Johnson, was there anything you'd like to say on the NHS? Anyway, there we are. An award-winning edition of PMQs Unpacked, I think it's fair to say. Thank you to Patrick McGuire.
We had a nice time.
Had a nice time. Patrick McGuire, Redbox editor. He'll be in your inbox for just after 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You can sign up, go to the Times.
Whatever time.
The Times.co.uk/Redbox. He's off to the pub now to back to the table before I go for lunch with him.
Pub, please. It's a bistro.
It is indeed a bistro. Hashtag beach joke. Right, up next we'll do the quiz, and but we're also going to talk about, talking of food, fish and chips, and why not? It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
Early breakfast on Times Radio with MHR. It's time to experience smarter HR, payroll and finance. Join Anna Cunningham every weekday morning from 5 for a fresh take on all the stories making the morning headlines.
I'll be reviewing the front pages you're waking up to and making sure you start the day well informed.
Plus, keep ahead of all the markets with Times Radio's daily dedicated business bulletin. Early breakfast on Times Radio with MHR. Unlock the potential of your business with MHR software and services. Find out more at mhrglobal.com.
Ready to meet your new summer crush? Well, look no further. This one's just your type. They're cool as they come and might just make you melt. And better yet, they're made of smooth caramel. Fall for the flavour with the Galaxy Caramel Mcflurry. Only at McDonald's. Available till the 8th of September, subject to availability.
Matt Chorley on Times Radio.